The Aston Martin brand has undergone a huge transformation over the last 30 years. From super spy icons to Le Mans winning hypercar building track rats. So how did the company that was once all about looks and style become an endurance racer, an F1 team, and a track weapon manufacturer? Well, actually, it's the story of a toxic relationship and a bad breakup. Today, I'm going to try my hand at OEM couples therapy as we look at the story between Aston Martin and Ford.
A huge thanks to Amaze for sponsoring today's video. You guys know we've helped give away some pretty amazing cars, like the Dodge Demon and Ram TRX, but I gotta admit, this one right here might be my favorite. That's right, one of you has the chance to win this 1988 BMW E30 M3 with taxes and shipping included. This vintage BMW wasn't built to just look cool, it was also built to go racing. And with only 27,000 miles on it, it's more than ready to hit the track or cruise the town. So for your chance to win this 1988 BMW E30 M3, go to amaze.com/donutmedia and donate today. Best of all, every donation supports the Skate Park Project, founded by video game and skate icon Tony Hawk. Video game icon? More like American hero. I want to meet Tony Hawk. All right, anyway. Their mission is to fund high-quality public skate parks in underserved communities to promote healthy and active lifestyles. So go donate for your chance to win at amaze.com/donutmedia. Good luck. I'm gonna go drive this thing.
Aston Martin has a long and storied history, but we don't really need to care about that right now. We'll start with the moment that really put Aston Martin on the map for the general public, and that was 1964's Goldfinger. James Bond and the Aston Martin DB5 machine gunned their way onto the silver screen with a silver paint job in style for days, and since then, Bond has driven Alfa Romeos, Lotuses, BMWs, and more Fords than anything else. In spite of all that, when you think of James Bond's car, you think of a birch silver Aston Martin. You picture a grand touring coupe with that single thin fender vent and that Tom Selleck mustache of a grille. Even though some of Bond's cars have become more gadgety, more featured, and even downright better cars, you can't separate Bond from Aston Martin. Remember when Bond drove a Buick Century in Tomorrow Never Dies? That was kind of weird, huh? But being an icon of a movie franchise did not necessarily translate into making money. In the 60s, Aston Martins were hand-built using archaic coach-building methods that may be unique and artisan, but they were very slow. The DB5 was produced for 3 years, and Aston Martin was barely able to make 1,000 of them. The demand was there, but they couldn't make enough to meet it. This made it hard to be a profitable business, and Aston Martin was sold to investment bank Consortium in 1972, then again to an American businessman in 1975, and again to an oil tycoon in 1981, and finally, it was bought by Ford in 1987. Now this is when Aston Martin's fortune started to change for the better in the short term, but less so in the long term. Ford placed Aston Martin in their new premier automotive group, which included Jaguar, Lincoln, Land Rover, and Volvo. Think of it as their business class lineup. Ford invested into new manufacturing for Aston Martin and built a new factory in Bloxham, England, for the DB7. Aston Martin broke production records, and by the end of its run, nearly 10,000 DB7s had been built and sold across all its variations. Ford gave Aston Martin the resources to be successful and the freedom to still make cars the way they wanted to. Ford really liked Aston Martin, and it feels good when someone tells you they like you. And you can tell us you like us by liking this video. But unfortunately, the Aston-Ford relationship started to turn, and like a Los Angeles influencer couple, it started to become apparent that Ford was only into Aston Martin for their looks. Trouble began with the 2006 launch of a car seemingly unrelated to Aston Martin, the Jaguar XK. The XK was a V8-powered rear-wheel drive coupe that had the class and sophistication to fit the venerable Jaguar name. But there was a problem. It was hard to deny that it looked like an Aston Martin. If I were a designer at Aston Martin, I'd be pretty pissed off by this. The lead designer for Aston at the time was a man called Ian Callum. He designed the beautiful DB7, the DB9, V8 Vantage, and the V12 Vanquish. He also designed the Jaguar XK. Since both brands were under Ford's premier automotive group, Ford shared designers and engineers between the brands. Callum wasn't an Aston Martin employee, he had been a Ford guy for 10 years, and while designing the DB9 and the Vantage, Callum was officially employed by Jaguar. For Ford, it made sense to take the best elements of the premier automotive group cars and share them among all the other brands. Volvo wants to do an SUV? Send them one of the Land Rover engineers. Lincoln wants to increase their safety rating? Have them work with the Volvo team. But for Aston Martin, the main asset they brought to the table was their iconic styling. And when you let people copy that, it's no longer your styling, is it? The V8 Vantage and XK were compared side by side by every car magazine and outlet at the time, and a lot of people agreed that the Vantage still looked better, but for $40,000 less, the XK was literally a poor man's Aston Martin. Okay, maybe not a poor man, but a less wealthy man. A hedge fund manager gets an Aston Martin, and an In-N-Out manager gets an XK. But look, one brand copying another style isn't new. It happens all the time in and out of the car world. And even though there is protection around copying a car directly, two cars looking kind of similar shouldn't really affect the sales of either, should it? But here's where the problem was. Aston Martin had a pretty unique look, and if you take that look away, what do they have left? Aston Martins of the 2000s were not known for their reliability. Jeremy Clarkson would often say that an Aston Martin's natural habitat was in a cloud of smoke at the side of the road. Also, they weren't necessarily fast for the price either. If you were in the market for a V12 powered supercar in 2005, you could get a V12 Vanquish S, or you could get a Lamborghini Murcielago, which had a lot more power, more torque, higher top speed, faster 0 to 60, a gated manual gearbox, it was mid-engined, and it was cheaper. That's crazy. If you were buying an Aston Martin, you were actively saying no to better performance in exchange for that British class and style that they were so well known for. Ford knew that the looks were what sold Astons, and I'll admit that the Ford era had some of the best looking Astons we've ever seen, but the unique styling that you used to only get by buying an Aston Martin was now getting kind of diluted. And if you only want it for the looks and don't really care about the performance, then the Jag started to become a much more tempting offer. Do you see the problem here? Ian Callum went on to design the XJ and the F-Type, which both pulled styling cues from Aston Martin. But the most egregious Ford move of them all was in 2013 with the Ford Fusion. Even though Ford had sold off Aston Martin to the British motorsport group ProDrive in 2007, they were still using what they had learned from having the Brits around. Have you ever looked at the redesigned Ford Fusion and thought, that looks like it's trying to be a bootleg Aston Martin? Well, you wouldn't be the only one. The 2013 Ford Fusion, or Ford Mondeo if you're not in the States, was given a full redesign that included the Aston Martin grille. Ford tried to put the supercar styling on an Econo box, and I will say, it does look pretty good, but that's because it's a four-door Aston Martin. Pretty hard to screw that up. At first, Ford buying Aston Martin must have seemed like exactly what Aston Martin needed to finally show the world what made them so special, and in a way, it did. Just not always on their cars. Now, I can understand if it sounds like I'm being hypercritical or trying to stir up drama, but I'm not just making this up now. In 2013, people noticed. There was even a dealership ad here in LA at the time where a Fusion owner said that the last time they went to dinner, the valet said their car looked like a European sports car. Come on, man. It's because Ford stole it. After being let go from Ford, Aston Martin was free from the mass marketing and shared workspaces of Ford. They were with new British owners that wanted to make Astons special. But this time around, making a good-looking car wasn't going to be enough. So they did something they'd never done before. They started making their cars really good. It started with the 2013 partnership with Daimler AG, otherwise known as Mercedes-Benz. The Germans would supply their engines to Aston Martin, and the first car to run a Benz power plant was the Aston Martin DB11. Aston Martin's lineup now had the power to back up the looks, but their drive to better themselves didn't stop there. Aston Martin started bringing out the big guns. After their split with Ford in 2007, Aston Martin stepped beyond being a grand touring brand and started going after the track car and hypercar world. The 177 was their first car with a sticker price over $1 million and was powered by a Cosworth V12 and was limited to 77 units. In 2015, they released the track-only Aston Martin Vulcan, a $2.3 million limited run coupe with a 7-liter V12 and the coolest taillights ever fitted to a car. Since then, they've announced another Halo car, the Aston Martin Valkyrie. The Valkyrie is being made in partnership with F1 team Red Bull Racing and is being designed by the legendary aerodynamicist Adrian Newey. Newey not only designed the cars that won Red Bull the F1 championship 4 years in a row, but he also designed 6 other championship-winning F1 cars for McLaren and Williams, so I think the guy knows what he's doing. And Aston Martin's track dedication is paying off. Since the breakup with Ford, they've been on the podium 8 times at the 24 Hours of Le Mans, and they've become a title team in F1, where they've already managed to score a 2nd place finish in their first year. One of the major stockholders in this new version of Aston Martin is Canadian billionaire Lawrence Stroll. Stroll spent nearly $200 million to outbid Geely, Lotus, and Volvo for his new spot as Aston Martin chairman in 2020. Stroll also owned a controlling stake in Racing Point F1, which this year is called Aston Martin Cognizant Formula One Team. The new owners like racing, so Aston is going to go racing. Stroll's involvement in the company is one of the biggest ties to motorsport for Aston Martin, and sounds like it's going to be dictating a lot of their future. The Valkyrie project that was being worked on in conjunction with rival F1 team Red Bull will continue. A relatively more affordable mid-engine car is also coming. It's called the Valhalla, and it looks like mid-engine cars are going to be a big part of Aston Martin's game plan from now on. Back in the 90s, Aston Martin was literally getting by on their good looks, but now they're having to put in the work, and I think they're better for it. These things look awesome. Look, I love my Fords, I really do, love my Mustang, but looking back at the ups and downs of Aston Martin's time with Ford, I think it's for the better that they broke up. Thank you very much for watching Wheelhouse this week. I love doing videos for you guys, so it means a lot that you guys watch them. What do you think of Aston Martin? Let me know down in the comments. I love that they've gone from really stodgy British blocks of moldette to like painting their cars like crazy neon colors and all that, and going after the McLarens and the Porsches. It's pretty awesome to see. Ironically, I am a Red Bull fan, but I'm always pulling for Lance and Sebastian every weekend in F1. Follow Donut on all social media at Donut Media. Follow me at Nolan J. Sykes. Be kind. I'll see you next time.